Right, so tonight we are going to be doing Corel Laser and K40 Whisperer. I will take care of the Corel Laser part and then I'll hand over to Billy when we are done with that. So basically we are going to cover normal settings, the user interface, how to set up your artwork to score, cut and engrave, some general tips and tricks, pros and cons, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me anytime. If you don't want to speak, you can just pop a question in the chat and we'll answer those as best as we can. So, on to the Corel. There's my user interface. Okay, Corel Laser's user interface. So, you have up in the top right corner there your little toolbar with all your settings. The first one just opens up the data settings. You don't mess with that. You just leave everything as is over there. Then you have engraving, cutting, some additional settings. Here you can change your origins and your page size and a couple of other things. So basically, if you look at your settings, you can see the max speed that your laser can run. Mine is set to 400 millimeters per second. So I know never to go above that. My page size is the size of my bed, which is 60 by 40. And then the origins I usually keep at 3 millimeters, but you can change that depending on where you want your origin point to be. Okay, so that's just a couple of basic settings. Then you have that little play button. Also your reset button that will just reset your laser head whenever you click on that. The round one is your stop button. If something goes wrong, just stop, but I usually just use the stop button on my laser instead of running to the computer and pressing that little button. And then you also have just the about with general Corel Draw information. Okay, so if you look at the Corel Draw interface, if you've selected your artwork, you choose to engrave it, it opens up this dialog box, and again you have a couple of settings that you can change around and play with. So you can rotate your artwork or mirror it. You can choose to engrave or cut, but usually if you just tick on the engraving button, it's already set to engraving, so don't mess with that. Then you can change your speed, you can change your parameters. There's a lot of different options there. I'll go into a little bit more detail there in just a second. So the common parameters, advanced parameters, and then your laser head step. Okay, so when we want to cut or score or engrave using Corel Laser, the first thing is that you have to have a couple of colors. I know when I was first taught how to use Corel Laser, they made it very complicated and you had to have shapes with no fill or with a white fill so the Corel Laser doesn't see it as a shape that needs to be engraved, but it just got kind of complicated really quick and it's difficult to keep your engraving in the center of the shape that you want to cut out or whatever. So the method I use works as follows. I use basically 4 colors. The yellow are for my cutting lines. I know this is different than most of you use on RDWorks and K40 Whisper and so on, but I will tell you why I use the yellow in just a second. So my cut lines are yellow. My score lines are red. It could be any color. I just remember the red to be score, so that that one doesn't matter. You can make it any color you want. Engraving, you want it to be black. And then blue lines are the guidelines. When I do my artwork, I just add in some guidelines and they are usually blue. So that is just also to keep everything together and I know where what goes. Okay, so if you take any shape, let me just put a shape in here. Then I have a pentagon. Shape is selected, and then I go to cutting. So you can see my pentagon there. It's going to cut. It's going to be fine. Let me just make this border a little bit thicker so that it can actually show up there. Okay, and when I engrave, this will also engrave. But if I want to cut out the pentagon and I need some text to engrave on the inside, then if I select engrave, it's going to engrave both the text and the outline of my object, and that is what I don't want. First of all, it's going to waste time, and second of all, there's just, you only want that to be a cut line. So if you change your cut line to red, for example, and you go to engraving, it's still going to engrave. It's going to engrave a little bit lighter, but it's still going to engrave. But when I change this cut line to clear, highlight both, engrave, there's nothing. But now in your artwork, when you have clear outlines everywhere for white shapes, it just, you're not going to know where your shapes are. So if you choose yellow, just make it thick again. If you choose yellow, Corel Laser actually does not read the color yellow as something to be engraved. So then...
Sorry, Liana, from the RGB palette or a CMYK palette, which palette are you using? I think that's pretty important.
RGB. But yes, you can always just check. You can fill it with a specific color, click on engrave, and then if you don't see the shape there, then you know Corel Laser is not picking up that specific color. There's a few different colors. I think this one also, let's see. No, that one will not work. Some of the very light colors, no, that one is also still there. Okay, yeah, so basically that is why I use the yellow. The yellow does not pick up on... Okay.
Liana, just out of curiosity, if you should change the transparency of the color, will that also, if you use the darker colors and you change the transparency?
Okay, let's check this one. So there you have the red will engrave dark, and then transparency. Like that, Carlo?
Yes, that's what I had in mind.
Engraving, no. Yeah, so just use yellow for cutting lines. Corel Laser does not see the yellow, but you can see the yellow, and you can just keep your artwork and everything together. It's nice and neat, and you don't have to struggle to get the text in the middle of an basically invisible object. Okay, so when you have like a square, for example, and you want to engrave everything that is inside the square. The square is on those guidelines there, and you can just highlight everything, click on engrave. It's going to pop up, everything that's going to engrave shows there, and when you are done, you can simply go select only the object that you want to cut, then click on cut, and now it will only have that little blocky, and you can cut out your shape. But some shapes are funny, like the circle, for example. Okay, it also still touches the guidelines there. So for engraving, that's not really a problem. Let me just show you. If I only choose the text to engrave without the shape, you can see that the text starts at the origin. So it's going to be in the upper left corner. But if you choose your shape as well, engrave that, then it moves a little bit down and it will be in the center of your cut. Right. If you want this text to score, for example, then you want it to have an outline, and this outline should cut, but at a very low power, so that it basically just marks your wood and it does not cut through everything. So I want the text to score, and I want the yellow to still cut. But now, if I select everything and go to cut, it is again going to cut out the entire shape. So this is where I bring in the red. So I get a vertical guideline as well as horizontal guideline, and then in this at the intersection of those guidelines there, I put in a little hookie there in red. So what I basically do is I just put in a blocky, convert it to curves, and then delete 2 of the sides so that you just have this upside down L shape. And then I put that on the intersection there. So all my cut lines are in yellow, all my engravings I do in black, and then everywhere that I want it to score, I do in red. So I select that. Oh, let me just select the red there. I already grouped those two, so it's the little red star that I want to be scored, and then that hookie that will just help me keep everything together nicely. Then I set up the yellow cut lines and the black engraving. And when I start cutting out this shape, I will first of all select the yellow and black groups and do the engraving. So select yellow and select black, and then go to engrave, and it's going to only engrave the black parts. But I need my yellow selected as well so that it does not move my engraving from the center of my object. Okay, so I have that, and I'm going to hit engrave and go. As soon as the engraving is done, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to select the red. Now, if I only selected the red star without that little hookie and cut it, then it will engrave the star in the upper left corner, or score the star in the upper left corner, which is not what I want. So I put in that little hookie, select them, go to cut, and then I will, okay, it's very small, but it is there. Then you go to cut, and you cut this normal speed, but at a very low power. Remember, you just want the laser to mark your wood. You don't want it to actually burn through. And then when I've done the engraving, I've done the scoring, I move on to my final cut. So then I select only the yellow, go to cutting, and cut at my normal power for cutting through whatever I am using. Okay, right. And when you are done, then it looks like this. So you can see that the star is engraved, or the bottom star is engraved. This one was the one that was in black. This is the red star, so it only scored. There's a cut line there, but it does not go all the way through. And then you have your cutout, which was the yellow star, so it cuts all the way through. Okay, so that is just cutting, scoring, and engraving. If we just go back to that one, let's look at a couple of settings for engraving. You can mirror your image and rotate your image in the Corel Laser software without mirroring and rotating your image in Corel Draw itself, but I feel both ways are easy anyway, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. And then you can also choose to have a sunken engraving, or if you tick that box, then it will engrave all the white parts and leave the black. So it just inverts your image, basically. So that's just another neat little setting. I usually use that for stamps. And then you must also remember to mirror. So tick mirror and untick sunken if you are doing stamps. Okay, speed settings there. You just change your speed setting to whatever you want. Then There's a couple of options for the frame. I don't usually mess with these. I just keep it on rectangle. But the referring a region spot, that the setting just under frame, that's actually also a nice one, especially if you have a funny shaped item like the hangers that you have to engrave for weddings and stuff like that. Then I like to put it on top center, for example, and you know that your reference point will be top center, and you can it's just easier to lay out your item in the laser. So you can choose there wherever you want your reference point to be. And if you change this, you can also see that this these guidelines on dialog boxes interface, that they also change and show you where that is going to be. So okay, so let's just put it back to top left, and you can also drag these around, and by dragging this your laser will go to this specific point to use as your origin. So if I want the object to be kind of in the middle of my laser bed, I just drag this to wherever. But dragging it gives you funny values there. You can see the X reference will be 246,2107. So if I'm busy engraving funny shaped objects, instead of dragging this around and getting all of these funny values, I'll put in, let's say, 250 there and 100 there. Okay, let's do 200 there. Then it's kind of in the middle, but then I know if there's a power failure or if anything goes wrong, I can easily go back, put in those exact reference numbers, and I will be able to start at the exact spot where I was. If you drag it around and you have these funny numbers, when something goes wrong, you will not be able to go back to that exact same starting spot. The release button will simply release your laser head, and you can also move that around before cutting or engraving. So you can move your laser head manually to exactly where you want it to be. I would not recommend that. Again, when something goes wrong, it's difficult to just get back to that exact same starting point. So rather just use the refer X and refer Y values. Okay, advanced parameters. I keep on all layers, pixel 2 steps, repeat once. And then the laser head step. This is not your scan gap. So this just, if you click on left, right, up or down, it's going to move your laser head by whatever that distance is there. Also just to fine tune and get it exactly where you want it to start. And then lastly, if you want to use your rotary, you switch on the rotary switch on your laser, as well as tick this little box. And remember to untick it after you're done with your rotary, otherwise your engravings and your cuts come out completely wonky. Okay, so then all you do when you get your rotary fixture setting, you type in the diameter of whatever object you want to engrave, and then okay, and you can just continue with your rotary. Okay, so a couple of tips and tricks that I've learned over the years I've been working with Corel laser. If you are engraving or cutting a small image, let's make this small. We're going to engrave it, but it's going to be very small. And on your interface, you can't really see if everything is there that should engrave, that should cut, or whatever. You can just right click on this interface and it will show you a preview image. So that is helpful. For example, where we had the cut, score, and engrave one. Let's engrave that one. So if you just want to make sure everything is there, you can see it will engrave that little hookie because I made it red, and then everything else along with that. If you choose cut, you can see that it's going to cut the little hookie, the circle, all of the stars, as well as the letters. So you can just make sure, okay, I don't actually want the letters to cut. So cancel before I start cutting. Go select only what you want to cut. Go back to cut, right click, and you can see exactly what is going to cut out before you start the laser and make a mistake. So that is the first tip that I have. You can preview your artwork dimensions on the laser. So choose whatever you want to engrave, click on engrave, and then when you click on preview on the right side there, you'll just turn your power to 0, click on preview, and your laser head will move around the entire dimensions of your artwork, and you can make sure that it is in the correct position before starting your cut or your engraving. And then the last one, for the best results whenever you are cutting something, just make sure that your style is set to cutting and then also inside first. Then it cuts out all the small pieces first and then the biggest one at the end so that your small pieces can fall out. Otherwise, if it cuts the biggest one first and the biggest one just tips a little bit, your laser head can bump against that, and then your entire piece moves and it is, yeah, it's a mess. Okay, so last thing before I hand over to Billy, some pros and cons on Corel Laser. The first one, and this is the biggest one for me, you have quick and easy access to cutting and engraving tools from within CorelDRAW. You don't need to save your files as SVGs. You can just open up CorelDRAW and directly send a file to the laser, so you don't have to export and then open it in another software. It's a simple user interface and it is easy to learn. Okay. And there's a couple of useful features in there, such as rotating images, mirroring images inside the laser software itself, and also then the options to change the order of cutting, like I said, where you have small to large, large to small, inside first, shortest route, whatever. You have a couple of different options there. The cons for me, Corel Laser does not handle grayscale images as well as other software. So you can still get fantastic photo engravings, but it is more difficult. You have to work with your images more to get the same quality that you get from other softwares without even having to do much, like on K40 Whisperer. Unfortunately, CorelDRAW does not give you any time estimates on engravings or cuts, so that is also a big con for me. And overall, it just has limited options and features compared to other laser software. And that is Corel Laser in a nutshell. Are there any questions before we move on to K40?
Liana, so my biggest gripe, and I think that's why you got your tricks with what you're showing us now, is that Corel Laser is not very good at remembering where the things are on the page space. So you have to reference them to each other, and that's why you've got the different colors to basically fool Corel Laser into knowing that your text is inside your cut line so that the stuff doesn't shift. 99% of help that I've been asked for has been because people are battling to align their cuts, their engraves. When I look at it on screen, it works. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't get it right. I had a little bit of a different trick, but I always had a little cut blocky that I never ever moved, and that little cut blocky was my reference. But yours is a much more elegant system.
Yeah, and this cut blocky or that hooky I put up there, that I only do when I have to score, because when you have your outline and you have your engraving, then even if I just want to engrave on a belt or on a knife or on whatever, I will just put a little rectangle as well in yellow so that it doesn't engrave, but so that I have that reference blocky to work with. But it is a pain, and that is why I set up this system, just to make it easier to work with.
Hi guys, so before I get started on the K40 Whisperer, I just want to tell you why I ended up on K40 Whisperer to begin with. It wasn't by choice. Not that I've got anything against K40 Whisperer. I was actually a Corel laser user. My machine came with a dongle, and something happened a few years back, and the dongle stopped working. I had a big job order, and it was going to take a weekend and a few days for a new dongle to arrive. So I didn't have a choice, and I hit the internet. And one of the softwares that worked with my particular board happened to be K40 Laser, K40 Whisperer, and that's what I've been using ever since. I still haven't bothered getting a dongle, and I didn't want to go and spend a lot of money. So as you can see on my screen over here, I don't know much about the different boards and the different types. So it works with these bunch of boards. So if your laser has got any of those boards, then K40 will work. If it's got a different controller, then it probably won't work. But you can always download it and see if it picks up your board or not. I know they're constantly making updates and they're constantly trying to make it better and better. But if I had bought my laser from a reputable guy who's got a track record, for example, a guy like Gerrit Stradom, we'll put his details in the bottom. And I'm not yet to diss any laser or any software or anything. But if you buy from somebody with a track record, and the biggest thing that you're buying is the aftermarket support. 99% of people that ask for help, it's literally because the salesman sold them a laser, and then you sit with the problems afterwards, and that's it. As far as K40 Whisperer works, it works on the concept of black for engraving, blue for a vector engrave or a score. A vector engrave or a score is when you use your laser as a cutter, but you have low power and high speed. Then it basically draws lines like a pencil or a pencil plotter. So you can get nice and creative by drawing different lines and things. Also for speeding up certain jobs. If you just need to engrave an outline of something, then don't do it on a raster engrave. The job's might take you half an hour for an A4. If you did it in a vector engrave, it'll literally take you 2 minutes. So, but there'll be more information on how to use vector engraves and raster engraves in our general work. This video is not about that, but it's very strict on black for engraving, blue for the vector engraving, and then the vector cut in red. You'll see here that it's pretty informative. It actually puts them in the different colors for you, and it only works on the RGB color scale. If you use any other color scale, when you bring your stuff into K40, it's not going to work. K40 can be very finicky. It doesn't like very large files, and if you've got a very large photo and stuff, sometimes you first got to restart your computer, make sure that you've opened nothing else. So just be careful that when you just keep that in mind when you do jobs on it. When you open it for the first time, it looks very blank, and you've got to do a little bit of setup to get it a little bit more user friendly so that you can actually know where you are at. If you go to File, you will see that it's got Save Settings, Read Settings. The Open and Reload design are the ones that we will use. You can also use the tabs directly from the interface over here, the GUI. You can open a design file and then point to your directory. Say I want SVG files. I see it does handle DXF files, and that when I started using it, it didn't handle SVG. So I've been saving in SVG for years now. I see. So I see you can use DXF, which is a very nice thing to see. So if I just open up a file, it's one that I just did 5 minutes literally before we had to sit down for this video. I had a last minute gift. It actually goes on the inside of a belt, hence the funny saying. And as you can see, it's black, which would be an engraving. When you open up K40, your design is going to be very small in the corner over there. So the thing I always do is I go to View and zoom to design size. Every time when you open up K40, it'll go back to default settings. So I'll show you now how you can actually save your settings once you've done your setup. So important thing is always make it zoom to design size, then it maximizes the screen for what you're doing. At the bottom over here, what's very cool is that it shows you the size of the workpiece you got that you can always check up against your material. And in the bottom right corner, it shows you vector engrave, vector cut, the time. You see it's got nothing for raster. If I click on the raster, it's then quickly going to calculate the scan gap and everything for us. And then it's going to give us the time. So this engraving at 150 millimeters a second is going to take about 1 minute and 26 seconds. K40 is pretty good at calculating engraving times. It generally works out well with my laser and with most people I've spoken to. But like with most softwares, when it comes to the vector cuts and the vector engraves, usually the actual ones in the machine take a bit longer. There's reasons with acceleration and deceleration and stuff. But if you've timed your laser and stuff, then you'll know more or less on different jobs if you need to add 5 minutes into your costing or whatever the case. But I take it as gospel. If K40 tells me it's 32 minutes and it ends up being 40 minutes in the machine, I don't worry about that anymore. My costing is good enough that it will take that into account, basically. Let me just open up another one. You'll see that's a little bit slow to load information and stuff, and that's just the way it is. But it's free and it works, so I'm not complaining. All right, so this was a frame for a 600 by 400 board. It's a backing frame and everything, but in here you'll see I've got the little beaks of the beak and the eyes are being engraved in black. It's got a blue outline for the score, because if I was to engrave all that blue, this thing would have taken like 2.5 hours or something. And quite frankly, if you do the score, it also gives you a nice detailed cut. But let's just go and calculate the raster time so we can see how long that's going to take. And this is probably the coolest feature that kept me on K40 and not going back to Corel Laser, because they both got their problems. But the fact that it gives me the time here is what made it a keeper for me. So you can see that it'll be 35 seconds to do your raster engrave, so don't run anywhere. And then you can see your vector engrave and your vector cut. But now there's also some cool, if we go under tools, under settings, and we put advanced settings on, it's also something that I'll show you in the settings file. I keep it so when my K40 opens up, it's already there, because I don't want to go and open this up every time. It should just be static, something that you can see here. So over here, we can mirror the design, we can rotate the design. It only rotates 90 degrees to the left. You can't specify different rotations, so it's not as versatile as anything else. So you have to set your artwork up right, basically from the beginning. You get one shot, you rotate one ways, and that's it. You can do inversions and other things. I always cut inside first so that drops off and do the outside lots. Most people probably do that. And over here, if you want to set up passes, I don't like doing it. I prefer to manually every time just recut. Over here, you can set up and say do 5 passes. And after every pass, you just got to hit enter and it will run through your passes if you're doing multiple cuts on very thick material or something for some reason. Under the settings file, the general settings, once you've set everything up, you can just pop in over here. And this is a trick that I wish I learned 6 months ago or 2 years ago, because it's the thing that done my head in, was you literally can just go in here, click on save, and when I open K40 up next time, my little bar is going to be here. It's automatically going to zoom into my art, and it's going to remember where my folder directory is that I go and look for my files for, because every single time I had to go and look for my folder directory. So you just got to overwrite that settings file. As far as settings setup goes, as I got it standard, I didn't change much. It actually auto picked up my board, but you can come and you can look on their documentation what the different boards are and then select it from there if you don't know.
I must say I went through the setup about 2 weeks ago, and everything just automatically picks up the laser as long as your laser is turned on when you install the software, but it's very easy to set up. It's really very easy to set up.
Yeah, so interesting. Liana actually trialed it for a week or so, and she went back to her old method. She didn't like it. So, you know, that's what it's all about. Anyways, when you go into the next set of settings, that's very important, especially if you're doing photos and stuff, is the raster settings. When you go into raster settings, you'll see that it works on a scanline step and it thinks in inches. So we've got little cool tables and stuff we can share on the groups again. I'm not going to go into detail of what a scanline is and stuff. That's a different topic altogether. But I use 0.03 for big things and things that I basically want to do quick engraving where I'm not worried about detail. If I'm doing small plaques and stuff for trophies where my font is smaller than a 15-point font in Windows, then I start going down to as low as 0.01 or 0.015 to get them nice and crisp when they're small. And when I'm doing my photos, I found obviously if you do the photos on the 0.001 or the 0.0015, the photo theoretically is that much better. But I found that the 0.02 is a nice middle point for me for a very nice photo and saving time at the end of the day. On 0.003, the photos just come out too coarse. So I go for 0.02 on photos, mostly big things and text. Solid fills you can do on 0.003, and if you want very nice details, the 0.0015.
That is a very nice setting that Corel does not have, unfortunately.
Yeah, so with Corel Laser, it's a different editing technique that we won't go into now either. But you've got to set your stuff up in a certain way. When you're using K40, you've got to think differently. If you're using ArtWorks or Lightburn, every software has its own algorithms. And if you're editing a photo like Liana was working on Corel Laser and watching one of her videos, it might not work as well on K40. One thing I can say about the K40 here is it's pretty good at handling grayscale images, which is awesome. So it's built-in functionality. If you just turn any photo into grayscale and you're not very good at editing and stuff, it's an excellent one to do your photos from if it can handle your board, because it does most of the thinking for you. And that's what gave me motivation again to get back into photos, was the fact that I saw the things just automatically look better when I did them out of K40. So now when I use Image R or whatever, I don't bother going for the CO2 wooden stuff. I just make my images grayscale and I know how to set them up for specifically this. I didn't go and mess around with any of the halftone resolutions or anything like that. So if you want to copy these settings, or just make sure that your settings look like this, it's got the halftone dither on and that resolution is set over there. I leave mine on the 0.003. If I'm doing engraving, I always spend a little bit of extra time to come and make sure that my settings and stuff are right and my setup is right, because I don't want to mess up engravings that take time. If you have a rotary and you're doing rotary settings, you obviously got to put the switch on your machine. Sorry, I got something hidden here. Click this button for activating the rotary settings. And then how to calculate the circumference. It's a very archaic method. You'll have to go and measure the circumference of your, or put some tape around your item, put it in your rotary. I normally use a 50 mil by 100 mil rectangle. So then you've got to engrave this thing or quick cut it, then measure it, divide the answer that you measured by the length of the actual rectangle. That gives you a ratio. Then you've got to come and put that ratio in here. Cut your little rectangle again on your rotary, check that it's coming to the right size, and then fiddle until you can get your image that it's not skewed or pushed. So it takes you quite a while, if you're not used to it, to get your rotary settings. And if you don't do it often, like I don't do it often, every time you sit, it can be quite a headache. I know in Corel Laser you put your outer diameter and stuff, and it's pretty accurate. But yeah, this can be quite a headache for you. But that's where you activate it. Just make sure to always turn it off I never leave it on, and I never save it on my settings file. Yeah, so once you've got that basic set up and you've got your lines in red, blue, and black, you know everything's great. What Corel Laser also does nicely, you can have 100% black, 90%, 80, 70, 60, all those different colors of the grayscale on the RGB. And you can have a picture with the different shades of gray. It doesn't lower and increase your settings. It cheats. It basically engraves just a different interval. So in 90%, it doesn't engrave the full thing black. It only engraves 90% of that thing, but still at the same speed and temperature that your machine set up. And so it does for 80. So it kind of fakes the temperature settings that more clever software would normally do. When you use different colors, it'll actually tell your machine to use different speeds and different settings. This doesn't do that. It's literally an algorithm that's running to help you out, and that's why the grayscale images work so well. When you actually want to do the cut, which is the important thing, you just say I've got nothing important in there. You just click on vector engrave. Okay, my machine is not initialized. I need to initialize the laser. Right, so once your laser is initialized, you can control your laser where it is from here. I got a jog step of 10 millimeters. You can change it to 5 or 100 if you want to move your laser around. What I normally do is I unlock my rail and I manually move it carefully. Just be careful where you touch and what you do if you do it manually, but you can unlock the rail and manually center something should you want to do it that way. You can also move it to let's say I wanted to move it to 200 minus 250, because that's where I've got my jig set up, for example, always at 200 minus 50, and I know when I put my jig in, that's where my positioning is. It's just things that you'll have to remember. Once you've got that set up right, you literally just come down here and you can click on the little boxes that it's got next to the color with the speed. It will then start sending your information to the laser, and the laser will start working, and it'll tell you in the bottom here what the percentage done is, which is also a pretty cool function. So, you know, if you've got a 10-minute job and that's 20% done, you've got 8 minutes left as an example. That saves me a lot of madness when I'm wondering how long it's going to take. If you want to pause or stop something, you can do it from the software over here. If it's not a problem and you don't need to emergency stop anything. Where it gets confusing, I think they've got the cancel and the okay mixed up. Because if you say okay, it cancels and everything's not okay. But if you cancel, then the job continues. So if you need to cancel a job, just make sure that you say cancel okay and not cancel and then the job continues more. Sometimes you just want to pause a job if you see something's gone wrong and you want to change the setting, or if you need to rush off somewhere and you don't want to leave your laser working. It works pretty well to pause the job and then cancel to start the job again. If you've canceled the job and the job didn't finish automatically, you'd always have to go back and initialize your laser again. Other than that, guys, if you want more info and stuff on the K40 Whisperer, you can go and Google it. They've got an excellent manual, and there are quite a few videos that show you more in-depth things. I just wanted to show you guys the basics that you need. Well, the basics that you need to get your jobs done. And the important thing that people need to remember is you have to send the information to K40 in the 3 colors: red for cut, blue for score, and black for a raster engrave. If you don't do it that way, it's going to pick the things up as all kinds of different colors. But a plus for K40 is it gives you the time of the job, and it's pretty accurate, and it actually works on a page space. So you don't need to have extra elements in your drawings or your designs that help you to remember where you are. If, as you see it, that's the way that it's going to cut it. So if you only want to do the raster engrave and you decide not to do the vector engrave, you just don't click it. And you don't have to do all 3 at once. You can literally do them one by one, or you can come and you can group them You can group them over there, but do so at your own risk. I don't use it, so I'm not going to vouch for it. I prefer to do my jobs one at a time that I know I'm in control of my final job. Guys, that's it from me. If there's any questions, I'd also love to hear from you guys if you're not scared to talk, what you're using and what problems you had. If you found any of this useful at all, I'd certainly love to have a conversation with you guys. And thanks for sharing your evening with us, guys.
Billy, I just want to find out, sometimes with K40 Whisperer, if your page layout doesn't fit your what you want to engrave or cut, it just cut off the edges of your work that you want to put in. So you have to go in and change your page layout to the size of what you got to cut or engrave, your whole program, your file that you have, and then put it back to K40 Whisperer.
Not 100% sure I understand what you are saying, but what I normally do is that I know that I don't export my whole page. I just export the artwork that I'm going to be using, and when I bring it into K40, as on the example that I had there, it then automatically puts that onto your screen. But if the work is bigger than what your laser can handle, I don't know if that's what you're saying, or if you were saying if you come in with artwork with a big page setup.
Now I also select for my file that I want to use. I use that, but sometimes it wants me to enlarge my page layout. That usually it's A4 size. Then the artwork is like, say, 300 or 400 by 200 or something like that, and then it cuts off the sizes because your page layout was not the same size.
Double check for me under your general settings at the bottom where it's got your board name. It's got the laser area width and height there. I don't think K40 is clever enough to pick up from your board what size your page is. So you have to manually go and put your page size in there and then save that file. And every time you open it up, then it won't be defaulting to an A4.
Yeah, but mine is 600 by 400, and that's my bed size.
Oh, so yours already set up like that?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not with all my work. It's just some of them that it just cut it off, and then I must go and resize my page layout. Because I also had to switch to K40 because I had a problem. My drivers on Corel Laser didn't pick up on my machine, and I had to go and buy a new laptop, and it did the same as my older one. So I just stick now with K40.
Yeah, I had exactly the same thing. I just wasn't willing to go and spend more money on something that I thought might just break again. So when I found something that works, I stuck to it. But I am planning on moving over to something like Lightburn in the near future, anyways. Because I'm also tired of battling. You know, everything we do here has a workaround. And if you get the stuff that's paid for, the difference between a paid for thing and something that's for free is that you know for a fact that the paid for thing is going to give you the support because they have to, because you're paying for it, and they're constantly working on it because people are putting money into it. So for something that's free, you can't really complain. But what I can tell you is that you can always go onto the website and you can leave them a message. I know everybody who's doing open source projects like this for free really do value the input from the rest of us. So if something's not working or something's broken, just give the developer a shout. Who knows, they might just be able to fix it. But if we don't let them know, then anybody else got some interesting stories?
Hi, I just want to say thank you for the info on Corel Laser. I wasted 2 boards by cutting from the outside in where the inside bits fell in. So I didn't know you could actually cut the small bits first.
Yeah, that's probably on, like I was saying, even on K40 and on Corel Laser, that's the number one thing. It should just be, they should not sell you a laser if they don't activate that setting on your machine.
Yeah. So that was great. Thank you so much.
Because because then it starts on the inside and then it does the outside at the end, and then sometimes when it cuts the outside out and your wood's a little bit bent, then the whole thing drops and it can go skew or something, So it's lovely that it cuts the insides out first and then does the outside rubbish afterwards.
Well, I'm going to go and try it now.
Sometimes change it and select the shortest route, but that is if I'm doing like key rings or something, for example, so it's the same shape just over and over and over again. I select shortest route instead of inside first. If there's no like inside pieces or then sometimes the shortest route is a little bit better, but most of the time, like 95% of the time, I use inside first. Billy was saying something about the percentage that your job has engraved. There's actually also a setting like that on Corel Laser as well, for those of you using Corel Laser. So if you look at your desktop, there's this little purple, pinkish purple icon, bottom right. If you right click on it, it also opens up just the same settings that your toolbar at the top there has. If you left click on it, it's going to say, if I left click it, it will just say that my machine is not initialized. But during a job, when you just click on that little icon, it will give you the percentage that it has done already. So you can click and see, okay, it's 50% done or 25% done or whatever. Just a way for you to keep track of your... Oh, and also if you click on that, after the job is done, it will show you the time that it took to do the cut or the engraving. So what I usually do is if I open a file, for me to remember how long, so I just make little notes in my file. This one cut for 4 minutes 7 seconds, this one cut for 1 minute 59 seconds, these leaves cut for 57 seconds, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now. So by now I have more or less an idea. If I have a 15 by 15 centimeter artwork, I know how long that will engrave. I'm not going to be like spot on with it, but I can actually estimate it quite well.
Yeah, I might just keep K40 Whisperer in the future just for the fact that it calculates that time so quick and easy. Don't attach it to your laser board or anything, because if you do install K40, by the way, while you've got Corel Laser stops working. So don't install K40 unless you're willing to break your Corel Laser, because then you've got to uninstall K40 and reinstall Corel Laser again. So don't go experiment if you
want a way. If you do want a way to calculate time, RDWorks is free to download. If you open that and you import, if you want a time estimate, you can download RDWorks and then import your artwork into RDWorks just for the time estimation, and then go use Corel Laser to cut it out. That is kind of a long workaround, but at least it will give you an estimate if you really need one.
Yeah, so like Leona was hinting to just now with her sizes, I just work in my head. I know that if I'm doing 6 coasters on an A4, I've got a certain price. If I'm doing an engraving on an A4, I've got a certain price. If I'm doing just an A4 cutout and not 6 coasters, I've kind of got like 3 prices for an A4 sheet, 3 prices for an A3 sheet, lots of cutting, little bit cutting, and then engraving price. And when I price, I just give that same price for any of the jobs, because the time it takes to go and work out each one, it's minutes that the things are different, and that's not where the main money comes from anyways. The main money and expense is coming from your skills and your time more than anything else. But you don't want to get it wrong that you've got an engraving that's going to take you 2.5 hours and you only quote the person for 1 hour. So but if you've done it for enough time and you've checked the time enough, you'll start getting confident and you'll know, look, it's an hour for an A4, 2 hours.
I really think that this is something that that beginners find necessary, to have that time estimate, because the longer you work with this and the longer you are doing it, the more you have the confidence to quote appropriately for a specific job.